May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Noah Surstrom, and I, along with my co-counsels Joshua Cottle and Kinsey Grant, represent the state of Florida, in this case the state of Florida versus Reagan Bushel. Today, we hold the burden of proof. We must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Reagan Bushel committed the crimes of aggravated battery and assault. And we are confident today that we can prove to you without any doubt that Reagan did in fact commit those crimes. Reagan was a student at Wheeler University. Reagan was trying to get through college, and Reagan needed to maintain a 3.5 GPA. You will hear today, because if she maintained that GPA and graduated college in 4 years, he would receive $20 million from a trust fund set up by his grandfather. Reagan Bushel was on track to do that. Reagan Bushel was going through college until Reagan Bushel ended in a class that was too difficult for him. He resorted to cheating, which is against the honor code of Wheeler University. His friend Becca Abels recognized this, and Becca Abels planned to turn him in for that cheating. And he knew. He knew that Becca Abels planned on doing that. And so, on the night of April 29th at the Woolly Wizard Festival, Reagan Bushel stabbed Becca Abels to keep her from presenting that evidence to the Student Judiciary Committee so that he would not be expelled from school and that he would not lose that $20 million promised to him. Today we are going to bring forth 3 witnesses to prove these facts to you. First, we're going to bring forth Detective Kennedy Shepard. Detective Shepard researched and interviewed all of the witnesses in this case, collected all of the evidence, and conducted the entire investigation. You will hear from Detective Kennedy Shepard why Reagan is the most likely suspect, how Reagan had the most motive, the most opportunity, and Reagan definitely had the means in the form of a Borland .550 knife, which you will hear from our next witness, Dr. Schwartz, that the wound inflicted upon Becca Abels' body is consistent with a test wound where she used a Borland .550 knife, the very exact same make and model of the one owned by Reagan Bushel. We will then call we will then call Devin Lynn. Devin Lynn is a friend of Becca Abels. Devin Lynn has lived on the same floor as Becca Abels in the Hayes dormitory. And Devin Lynn knew about Becca Abels' problems with Reagan Bushel. Devin Lynn will tell you today how Reagan harassed Becca and Reagan pursued Becca to try and get her to not report him for cheating. He needed desperately for her to not turn him in so that he could graduate from college. And you will hear how angry Reagan got and how desperate Reagan was when Becca turned down these propositions. When Becca tried to walk away, and when Becca tried to do the right thing, she was stopped by the knife of Reagan Bushel as he plunged it into her chest, and as she fell to the ground, bleeding. Becca Abels cannot testify today. Becca Abels is now in a coma. She is unresponsive because of this aggravated battery perpetrated by Reagan Bushel. You will hear also that earlier that very night, there was, at a bar, a confrontation between Reagan and Becca. This was the last time that Reagan pleaded with Becca, and that Reagan yelled at Becca that she couldn't do this to him. But Becca tried to walk away. Becca tried to leave and not cause any problems because she knew that she planned on doing the right thing and reporting Reagan. But Reagan couldn't have that. Reagan pursued her. Reagan grabbed her shoulder and turned her around and continued yelling. And even after that, Becca kept her composure. Becca still tried to walk away. But later that night, during an hour and a half where Reagan's location cannot be accounted for by any of the witnesses you will hear from today, Becca Abels was stabbed with a Borland .550 knife and had the fibers of the shirt that Reagan Bushel was wearing on her person. You will hear today so much evidence that there will be no doubt as to who perpetrated these crimes of aggravated battery and assault, and you will know without a doubt that Reagan Bushel is guilty of both of these counts. Thank you.
Anything to object? You would have objected to the prosecution's opening statement being argumentative?
May I proceed with your opening statement?
ladies and gentlemen of the jury, conviction can only be reached when the prosecution can prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, however, there is not only a reasonable doubt, but rather an abundance of it. The only truth that can be seen in this case is that Reagan Bushell is not guilty of aggravated assault and aggravated battery. Good afternoon. My name is Derek Nagler, and I, along with my co-counsel, Mr. Zach Schrepfer and Mr. Lane Garrett, represent Mr. Reagan Bushell today. Reagan Bushell and Becca Abels have been friends since childhood. They grew up together, played together as little kids, studied together in high school, competed against each other in everything, and finally they attended Wheeler University together. They were even placed in the same dormitory. During his sophomore year, feeling the freedom of being away from his parents and out on his own, Reagan Bushell decided to move out of the dorms and get an apartment with his new friend, A.G. Prout. The testimony will show that despite being separated from Becca, that he still maintained a close friendship with her, seeing her almost every weekend. You will hear that despite being a partier at the university, that Reagan Bushell was a well-rounded student and always an exceptional friend. Reagan Bushell came from an affluent and distinguished family. This, having its obvious perks, also had its downsides. Reagan's parents put an immense amount of pressure on him to succeed, in which not even A-minuses were acceptable. But all Reagan had to do was maintain a 3.5 GPA and graduate from Wheeler University. If he could do this, then he would receive $20 million that had been set aside in a trust fund by his grandfather. This 3.5 GPA wasn't acceptable to Reagan's parents. And in an attempt to relieve the pressure put on him by his parents, Reagan Bushell decided to apply for the Lion Prize. Now, the Lion Prize is a distinguished academic award given to Wheeler University students. Reagan's friend, Becca Abels, had also decided to apply for this prize. Despite competing against each other amiably for years, Becca Abels took offense to Reagan's application. So much so that she decided to turn Reagan in for plagiarism and possibly get him expelled. The testimony will show that Reagan did not apply for this prize maliciously, and that he had no intentions of hurting Becca. You will hear that despite the threats of Becca Abels of possible expulsion, that Reagan just wanted to make amends with his friend. And on the night of the Woolly Wizard Music Festival, Reagan tried to do just that. The testimony will show that Reagan Bushell encountered Becca Abels at Sharp's Brewery. You will hear that after 2 attempts of reconciliation, Becca Abels decided that she needed to walk away and think about everything. Reagan, feeling that things had taken a turn for the better, decided to take a walk of his own. The testimony will show that Reagan was spotted near the southeast end of the festival, the opposite side from which Becca was stabbed. After concluding his walk, Reagan went back to his campsite. He packed up his camping equipment, changed the clothes that had gotten dirty while doing so, and then he texted his friend A.G. Prout to let him know that he was ready to leave. The testimony will show that while packing up his camping equipment, that Reagan noticed that some of his stuff had gone missing. Some camping equipment, some cooking utensils, and his Borland 550 knife, which had been a gift from his uncle. After A.G.'s arrival, Reagan took her back to their apartment and then decided that he wanted to spend the weekend at his parents' house. The next morning, he found out about Becca Abels. You will hear from Reagan Bushell himself that he was traumatized by the news. He will tell you that he spent hours in his room weeping for his friend, and that in an attempt to rid himself of all the painful memories of that night, that he had his car cleaned and threw away the clothes that he had worn that evening. You will hear from the prosecution that there were over 27 arrests made the night of the attack. You will hear that Reagan's knife cannot be directly linked to the attack because it was never tested. You will hear that the shirt fibers found near Becca Abels' wound cannot be directly linked to Reagan Bushell's because they were never tested. And even if they were, they didn't have to be transferred during an attack. You will hear from Reagan himself that he had used a chemical called quick dry spray on his knife. This chemical, commonly used to clean knives, was not found near the wound, therefore eliminating Reagan's knife from the attack. Lastly, you will hear that Becca's blood alcohol content, along with the sweatshirt that she wore on the night of the attack, would have prevented a transfer of blood to the attacker. In short, ladies and gentlemen, the facts of this case in no way support Reagan Bushell's guilt. There were over 5,000 people at the festival night who all had the means to commit this attack. Even Reagan's friend, A.G. Prout, who had the opportunity, the means, and the motive. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the facts of this case are inconsistent. They rely on weak and ambiguous foundations that in no way support Reagan Bushell's guilt. It is your duty to hold the prosecution with the burden of proof. And I trust that after hearing all of the testimony and seeing all of the evidence, you will return a verdict of not guilty on both counts. Thank you.
call your first witness?
The prosecution calls Detective Kennedy Shepard to the stand.
All witnesses have been previously sworn.
Good afternoon, Detective. Could you introduce yourself to the courtroom, please?
Yes. My name is Detective Kennedy Shepard.
Where are you currently employed, Detective?
I'm currently a detective with the Emerald City Police Department.
What did you do before that?
Well, nothing really. Right out of high school, I attended the Emerald Police Academy, where I learned all the basics of becoming an effective law enforcement officer.
And how long have you been a law enforcement officer for?
I've been a detective for 5 years, and a police officer for the 14 before that.
Okay. And Detective, on the night of April 29th, 2011, where were you?
On April 29th, 2011, I was in the Emerald Preserve near Emerald City, Florida. I was working undercover at the Woolly Wizard Music Festival.
Did you receive any calls that night?
Yes, I did. At around 11:34 p.m., I received a call from dispatch. Apparently, there had been a girl found wounded near the campground area.
Did you respond to that call?
Yes, I arrived on the scene with paramedics at around 11:45.
What did you find upon arrival?
I found the body of the girl. Her lung had been punctured by what looked to be a knife. Blood was just oozing out of the wound. I've seen a lot in my 19 years, but nothing really quite so gruesome as that.
Was the girl still alive?
Just barely. The paramedics were able to find a very faint pulse, but she was very lucky to be alive.
Were you able to find any witnesses nearby?
Yes, I was. There was a young woman who was very, very shaken up, but I later calmed her down and found that her name was Devin. She was not one to call her, and she actually knew the victim.
Did you interview Devin Lynn?
Yes,
Your Honor, any statement offered by Ms. Lynn will be hearsay.
The witness hasn't said anything. I'm overruled. I don't believe calls for hearsay.
I'll ask you again. Did you interview Ms. Lynn?
Yes, I interviewed Devin Lynn for about 40 minutes, and I learned the basics of what had been going on.
Could you explain the
Objection,
basics?
Your Honor. The witness has testified that he learned the basics of what is going on. He could only have learned that had she told him that, so the statement is hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm not offering this. This statement isn't being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, only to establish a basic timeline of events of Detective Shepard's investigation of this case.
Your Honor, if the statement is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, then why is it relevant to the case?
Your Honor, it goes to show Detective Shepard's thoroughness in conducting this investigation, that it was...
Anything further? Overruled.
Again, could you explain the basics of what she discovered?
Yes, the victim's name was Becca Abels. She was a student at Miller University, and apparently she'd been having a lot of trouble with a fellow student by the name of Brady Bushel.
And were you able to rule out whether or not this crime was a robbery?
Yes, I was. Before she was taken to the hospital, I checked Becca's person. She still had her wallet, and there was money in there. She also had her phone. So I ruled out the possibility that this was a robbery. In my opinion, this had to be an intentional battery.
You mentioned some problems she was having with Brady Bushel. Could you explain those?
Yes, apparently Becca was set to report Reagan for cheating to the Student Judicial Affairs Council that next Monday, Monday, May 2nd, 2011.
With that information, who is your primary suspect in this case?
Well, initially I actually suspected Devin, because Devin was the only person on scene. However, things at this point started to point to Reagan Bushel.
Did you attempt to find Reagan?
Yes, I did. I attempted to do that the next day. But before that, I received a call from Dr. Marion Schwartz, the medical examiner.
And did you talk to Dr. Marion Schwartz?
Yes, I did. Apparently, Miss Abels had sustained a
Objection,
stab
hearsay.
Sorry, what?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, this falls under the hearsay exception of a medical statement. It's simply to show the state that Dr. Abels was in her diagnosis that it was in fact a stent.
Overruled.
What did Dr. Mayer,
According to Dr. Schwartz, Miss Abels had sustained a stab wound to her thoracic cavity. She was currently in a comatose state. Dr. Schwartz also mentioned the fact that the weapon in question had to have been a knife. And also there were certain blue fibers found near the stab area.
Objection, Your Honor. This does not fall under the medical statement exception. The medical statement exception on page 75 clearly states that the statement must be made for the purpose of medical diagnosis or treatment. Whether or not there were fibers found on her body has no medical relevance.
I'll ask the witness to not testify as to the fibers that were found on the body.
Please speak a little louder.
I'm sorry. I can limit the witness's response to including only the medical aspect of this discussion.
Overruled, but go ahead and restate your question appropriately, please.
Okay, thank you. Could you explain what you learned about the injuries sustained to Dr. Abels?
Yes, the stab wound to her thoracic cavity looked to have been sustained by a knife without origin.
Did you know anything else about this knife?
Not at that point. However, I did learn certain things about it from A.G. Prout later in the day.
When did you speak to A.G. Prout?
Actually, I was looking for Reagan when I came across A.G.
Where was this?
This was at A.G.'s and Reagan's apartment.
Was Reagan at the apartment?
Reagan was not at the apartment. Apparently, Reagan was at his parents' house on the other side of town.
Is his parents' house Reagan's normal place of residence?
No, it is not.
Did you interview A.G.?
Yes, I did, and I found that Reagan had indeed had a knife that evening.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained.
Following your interview with A.G., what did you do?
At that point, I decided the logical thing to do would be to further look for Reagan. So I decided to go to his parents' house.
And was Reagan there?
Yes, Reagan was there.
Did you interview Reagan?
Yes, I did interview Reagan.
What did Reagan have to say, if anything?
Well, first of all, I inquired about Reagan's Orland 550 serrated edge folding knife, which apparently he had on April 29th, and also about Reagan's bright blue shirt, because I assumed that the fibers that Dr. Schwartz found could have come from Reagan's shirt. However, both of those pieces of evidence that could have potentially linked Reagan had gone conveniently missing.
Where did the shirt missing?
Well, apparently that very morning, we're still on Saturday, April 30th, Reagan had thrown out his blue American Pima cotton shirt.
Did you call the trash company or anything?
Yes, and I learned that the entire load had been incinerated. There was no way to recover the shirt.
Were you not able to recover Reagan's knife?
Apparently, Reagan's knife had happened to be stolen on April 29th.
Did Reagan ever file a police report about that stolen knife?
No. And I'm inclined to doubt that Reagan's knife was
Objection,
actually
lack of
stolen.
predicate. This witness has not testified as to how he would know whether or not Mr. Bushel filed that police report.
Your Honor, as a police officer and a detective and somebody who is present at the Woolly Wizard Festival, he would have, and the investigator of this case, he would have reasonable knowledge of all of the other arrests and all of the other accusations made at the night of the Woolly Wizard Festival, and would know whether or not Reagan Bushel ever filed a police report.
Anything further?
My objection stands, Your Honor. He still has not laid the predicate. I'm not saying this witness might not know that. What I'm saying is the witness has not established that he would have any way to know that.
Sustained.
Did you, during the course of your investigation, look into the other arrests that were made at the night of the Woolly Wizard Festival?
Yes, actually that same night there had been 27 other arrests for robbery and everything. However, it was later found that none of those in any way were connected with the stabbing of Becca Abels.
Were any of those made by Reagan Bushel accusing somebody of stealing her knife, or his knife?
No.
So did Reagan Bushel ever file a police report about his stolen knife?
No, there was no report ever filed.
Were you able to search Reagan Bushel's car?
Yes, I was. I was actually looking for traces of blood that may have come from the shirt. However, Reagan had detailed his car earlier that same morning.
And Detective Shepard, with all of the investigation that you've done at this point, were you able to make an arrest?
Not at this point, seeing as the evidence had gone conveniently missing, as I have said. However, I decided to do the next best thing and buy a Borland 550 serrated edge folding knife and a blue American King of Cotton shirt, matching the one that Reagan had on April 29th.
Detective, how were you able to know that those were the exact type of items that Reagan had that night?
I learned from A.G. Prout that they were both.
Objection, Your Honor. A.G. Prout's statement has already been stricken from the record. And Mr. Prout, excuse me. The detective it's already been established that it is hearsay and the detective cannot testify to what Mr. Prout said.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did
Move
you
to strike, Your Honor.
Yes, you must have this one.
Did Reagan speak about his Borland 550 in his shirt?
Yes, Reagan had mentioned that they had both gone conveniently missing.
And so were you confident that the knife and the shirt you secured were exact same make and model as the ones that Reagan had that night?
Yes, completely sure.
And what did you do with that knife and that shirt?
Well, I handed them over to Dr. Marion Schwartz, the medical examiner who had received Becca's body.
What did Dr. Marion Schwartz do with them?
I believe that Dr. Marion Schwartz conducted a series of tests on them. I believe that one of them may have included a flesh-like silicone substance.
And with the tests from Marion Schwartz, were you able to make an arrest?
Yes, because both the shirt and the knife were 100% matches for the stab wound and for the fibers found near the wound area. I had more than enough probable cause to arrest Reagan Bushel.
And why were you able to rule out robbery as a possible reason for this crime?
Because Becca was
Objection, asked and answered.
Pardon me?
They've already asked and answered this question, Your Honor.
I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And from your investigation and all of the witnesses that you questioned, who, in your opinion, had the most motive the night of that April 29th?
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is not an expert witness and therefore cannot give their opinion.
I will withdraw my question. And why did you arrest Reagan Bushel over any of the other witnesses?
Because all of my needs
calls for
pointed to
ultimate
Reagan
opinion.
Bushel.
Sorry.
Calls for ultimate opinion.
No, I don't believe that that's a recognized objection in this mock-up.
Yes, Your Honor, it is. It's under the opinion objection.
Not recognized under this competition rule.
Your Honor, it's page 69, objection number 6.
I'm sorry, I don't have that particular page. Read me the objection that's permitted, please.
Opinion. The counsel is asking the witness to give an opinion, and that's an objection. Objection. Would you like me to approach the rules, Your Honor?
No, I'd like for you to tell me, excuse me, he has asked for his opinion.
Yes, Your
And
Honor.
you believe that his opinion is not permitted?
His opinion is not permitted, Your Honor. It's under the objections that we have here, his opinion is not permitted.
What do you say, Mr. Surstrom?
Your Honor, I never asked his opinion. I asked why he arrested Reagan Bushel and what gave him the probable cause to arrest Reagan Bushel.
Overruled.
So why did you arrest Reagan Bushel?
Well, all of my leads from the knife and the shirt, coupled with the fact that Reagan stood to lose $20 million had he been convicted by the Student Judicial Affairs Council, led me to believe that no one else besides Reagan Bushel could have committed this crime.
Thank you. No further questions.
Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Detective Shepard, when you found the knife used to commit this attack, did it have Mr. Bushel's fingerprints on it?
I never found the knife, actually. However, I did find a matching one.
You never found the knife used to commit the attack?
No, I did not. That had been gotten rid of.
When you found Mr. Bushel's clothes, was there blood on them?
No, I cannot recover the shirt anyway because that had also been gotten rid of.
Do you have any direct evidence linking Mr. Bushel to this crime? Anything with his DNA, anything with his fingerprints?
No, but again, I have two 100% matches and a lot of probable cause.
Let's talk about those 100% matches. Those are knives that you went and bought and a shirt that you went and got, right?
That had been confirmed by Agent Prout, Reagan's roommate, who I believe would
Your Honor, the
probably
witness
know.
is offering Mr. Prout's statement right now. I move to strike that. So, there were also at that festival 27 other arrests made, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant.
Your Honor, they've already brought it out.
Overruled.
There were 27 other arrests made, correct?
Yes, but none were connected with the stabbing of Becca Abels.
And some of those, none of you made that connection.
It was
Some of those
specific
other
facts.
arrests, those were violent crimes, weren't they?
Yes, they were, but again, none were in connection with the stabbing of Becca Abels.
Thank you. And there were 5,000 people in attendance at this festival?
More or less. I know that there were thousands.
And you never investigated anybody but Reagan Bushel for this crime, is that right?
In my opinion, there was no need to.
Even
Everything-
though A.G. Prout had the opportunity to get the knife and the motive to attack Miss Abels?
Originally, all the doors were open. However, everything that I found led to Reagan Bushel. All my leads led to Reagan and no one else.
So in answer to my question, you never investigated anybody else, even though somebody else had the opportunity to commit this crime, is that correct?
Lots of people had the opportunity to commit crime.
Okay, thank you, that's what I was asking. And finally, Detective, there is no direct evidence linking this.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I don't think I asked this specific question, Your Honor.
Overruled, Mr. Sussman.
There is no direct evidence linking Mr. Bushel to this case, is that correct?
There were the two 100% matches
Of a knife and a shirt that you bought, correct?
and were tested by a professional forensics expert
Of a knife and a shirt that you bought, correct?
and were later confirmed.
That Mr. Bushel did not own at any point in time.
Yes, however, they were the same make and model.
Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Were the knife and the shirt that were tested the exact same type of knife and the exact same type of shirt that Reagan Bushel was in possession of the knife that you're looking at?
Yes, they both were.
And were you confident of that fact?
Yes, 100% confident.
Thank you. No further questions.
May this witness be excused? You're excused, Detective. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please call your next witness.
State calls Devin Lynn to the stand. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name to the court?
Hello, my name is Devin Lynn.
What is your occupation, Ms. Lynn?
Currently, I'm a senior at Wheeler University, and I'm 21 years old.
What do you study at Wheeler University?
I study political science.
And how did you come to be interested in political science?
Well, after I met my best friend Becca Abels in the Hayes dormitory, she really intrigued me with the profession.
Were you good friends with Becca?
Becca was my best friend. She was like a sister to me. We did everything together.
Did you have any common interests with Becca?
Yes. We were both very adamant about our school. We strived to make good grades. We wanted to make the best of our lives.
Did you meet any other people at Wheeler University through Becca?
Of course. Becca was really good friends with this guy, Reagan Bushel.
And how did you feel about Reagan Bushel?
It was all right. Personally, I chose not to be friends with him, rather acquaintances.
And why did you choose this?
Well, I really didn't like to be friends with people who lie and cheat.
What do you mean?
Objection, Your Honor. That's an improper character or testimony, as the witness is stating about Mr. Reagan Bushel about him lying and cheating, which we have not provided evidence of. She knows that.
Your Honor, if I may, this witness is well aware of the defendant's lying and cheating, as she was aware of it through Becca and knew of it through Reagan.
May I respond? Can I please change my objection then to lack of predicate, as she has not laid the predicate for how she would know about this cheating and lying?
Do you wish to respond?
If you would like me to go back and lay more foundation, I would be happy to do so.
Thank you.
Do you know how long Reagan and Becca had been friends?
They've been lifelong friends since childhood.
And did they continue to stay this close through college?
No. Once they got to college, they started taking different paths.
Could you please describe the path that Becca took?
Becca took a more, she was more into school, more into studying, getting good grades.
What about Reagan?
Well, he was more into partying.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance to why Mr. Reagan Bushel likes to do what he does on his free time, as in witnesses stated.
Your Honor, if I may, I was asked to go back and lay more foundation as to the character of the witness.
Proceed.
Do you know what kind of path Reagan took?
Reagan was more into partying. He'd rather go out and hang out with one of his friends named G. Crowell rather than study.
And how did you come to know all of this?
Well, through being friends with Becca.
Now, was there any action in particular that Reagan took that displeased you or Becca?
Yes. Becca and Reagan were taking this campaign strategies course, and it's really difficult. And Reagan presented a paper to Becca that he had stated that he used, that was AG's, and it had gotten him an A, and he said that he had known that Becca was having trouble with it, so he figured maybe she might like the paper to help her.
Now, as a student at Wheeler University, is this against the honor code?
Yes, it is. It can result in expulsion or failure of the class.
Now, have you ever taken this campaign strategies course?
Yes, I'm currently taking it now.
Is it difficult?
It is very difficult, but it's not impossible.
What was Becca's reaction when she was offered the plagiarized paper?
She was upset that Reagan would even put her in a position to have such a consequence happen to her.
Do you know what she did upon getting the email?
Well, she responded saying that she wasn't...
Objection, Your Honor. Before the witness moves on, this is hearsay, as the witness is stating what Becca is responding, which is an out-of-court statement that is being used to prove the truth of matters.
I mean, this is not going to prove the truth of the matter, certainly, as it is merely going to show that Becca was upset that Reagan had put her in this position. As Becca is not on trial, is not going to prove the truth of the matter, certainly.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Certainly.
Well, just because Becca is not in the courtroom does not make it not a hearsay objection for us to bring in statements that she's made outside of the court.
You want to say anything more?
I still believe that this witness is qualified to testify.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I still believe that this witness is qualified to testify to Becca's reaction on receiving the email. She was present when she received the email.
Overruled.
What was Becca's reaction upon receiving this email?
Becca was really upset that Reagan would even put her into a position to where she could possibly fail a course or even be expelled from Wheeler University.
Why was Becca so interested in her integrity and having good honor?
Well, not only did she want to graduate from Wheeler University, she also wanted to win the Lion Prize.
What is the Lion Prize?
The Lion Prize is a monetary award that's given to a student who has academic skill and good integrity.
And would a trip to the Honor Council be detrimental to someone running for the Lion Prize?
Yes, it would.
Why did Becca want to win this prize so badly?
Well, Becca really needed the money, and also she felt that it would help with her career.
Was Becca named a finalist for the Lion Prize?
She was, along with Reagan Bushel, who had originally said that he wasn't going to go for the prize.
How do you know that Reagan said he wasn't going to go for the prize?
He told Becca. He
Now,
bounced Becca.
how did you know that Reagan was also named a finalist?
Well, I was going to talk to one of my professors one day, and I was walking past the bulletin board, and I saw not only Becca's name, but also his name as well, with 2 other finalists.
Did you tell Becca?
Yeah. As Becca's best friend, I felt that I had to tell Becca.
And what was her reaction?
She cried. She couldn't believe that Reagan would betray her this way.
Objection, Your Honor. The only way this witness would know this is through hearsay.
Sustained.
Move to strike, Your Honor,
Distracted.
and may the jury disregard.
Disregard.
Upon hearing that Reagan was also named a finalist, do you know what Becca planned to do?
Yes, Becca was furious that Reagan was going to do this, so she took it upon herself to write a complaint to the Student Judicial Affairs Council, reporting him for plagiarism, underage drinking, and drugs.
And would this plagiarism result in expulsion from Wheeler University?
Yes, it would, or it could result in a failure of a class, which
Now, did you attend the Woolly Wizard Music Festival?
I did.
And did you go with anybody?
Yes. I went with my best friend, Becca Eagles.
Did you two drive together?
We did. We drove together.
What did you do upon arriving?
When we first got there, around 6. We just walked around a little bit, watched the different bands. And then around 9 o'clock, we went to Sharks Brewery.
Did you see anybody from school at Sharks Brewery?
Yeah. Reagan walked in and immediately saw Becca and I and just beeline for us. Reagan was yelling and screaming at Becca.
Is Reagan in court today?
Yes, he is.
Could you please identify him by stating a piece of clothing he's wearing?
He is sitting over there in the red tie and black coat.
Let the record reflect that the witness has properly identified the defendant. Now, you said that Reagan was screaming. Do you know why?
Well, I was fairly certain that it had something to do with Becca turning him in, resulting in him being expelled or failing that course.
Now,
Objection hearsay, Your Honor, to how she would know this, or in that case, lack of personal knowledge, to how she knows what Reagan Bushel is thinking at the time.
if I may,
Lack of personal knowledge, Your Honor.
this witness was present during the time of the altercation at Sharks Brewery. She was right next to them, and she knew the dynamic of their friendship prior to the incident. Therefore, I believe she has the ability to testify as to why Reagan may be angry.
Overruled.
To answer the question, is why Reagan may be upset?
The only thing that Reagan possibly could have been upset with Becca about was the paper and her turning him into the Student Judicial Affairs Council.
Did Becca and Reagan ever get to have a full conversation?
No, they didn't.
Where did Becca go?
Well, after Becca would have listening to Reagan, she walked outside and Reagan followed her.
What did Reagan do?
Well, he yelled at her, grabbed her, turned her around, and made her listen.
Did Becca listen?
She didn't want to, but she did, and then
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of personal knowledge to how she would know if Becca Abels was wanting to listen to what Mr. Reagan Bushel had to say at this point.
Sustained.
Where did Reagan go? Where did Becca go after this altercation with Reagan?
she was going to go get a sweater from her car.
Objection, Your Honor. The only way this witness knows this is through hearsay.
Your Honor, Becca told the witness that she was going to her car to get a sweater. She's qualified to testify to this today.
Your Honor, that is hearsay. That is the definition of hearsay is now court statement used to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
Sustained.
Did you ever see Becca again that night?
No, I didn't. Becca told me that she was going to text me later, and she never did.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you go back to your campsite that night?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find, Ms. Lynn? If you need a moment, feel free to come.
Becca was lying on the ground. Her sweatshirt was torn. She was sitting in her own blood. It's the worst thing I think I've ever seen. I couldn't even tell if she was breathing or not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Yes, Your Honor. May I continue? May I continue?
Please, proceed.
You didn't like Reagan Bushel very much, did you?
Not personally, no.
Well, you called him a rich, selfish, lazy kid. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor. You're relevant.
Your Honor, this is relevant as this will show bias and evidence towards Reagan Bushel.
I believe that this witness's opinion of what kind of a person Reagan Bushell is has no bearing on whether or not Reagan Bushell did in fact stab at Gables.
May I respond?
Sure.
The bias will show the credibility in this witness's story, therefore, asking these questions will attack the credibility of this witness, which is allowed in this jurisdiction.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Once again, you called Reagan Bushell a rich, selfish, lazy kid, isn't that true?
That's correct.
And you didn't like H. Scott very much, did you either? You thought he was an even bigger loser than you thought Reagan Bushell was, isn't that true? Now, in your affidavit, you reportedly saw Reagan Bushell, isn't that true?
Yes, I did.
But he was 30 feet away, isn't that true?
No, he was only 3 feet away. I can tell it was him.
But you screamed his name out and he didn't say anything, isn't that true?
There were also 5,000 people at this festival. It was loud.
It was dark outside, isn't that true? So how can you be sure it was him? If it was dark outside, he was 30 feet away, and you even screamed his name out without a response.
Well, 30 feet away is not that far away. It's a festival of 5,000 people. So there are a lot of different people. There are a lot of people wearing blue shirts. And as far as the lighting, there were carlights shining on half his face. I can tell it was him.
Well, as you stated that there were 5,000 people at the festival, and there was a lot of people around this, is that what your previous statement was? There was a lot of people around? So that's why you didn't respond?
And it was a loud festival.
So there was a lot of people around this. You agree with that statement?
Yes, but that's not the
Okay,
only
so
reason
30
we're
feet
around.
isn't very far when there's nobody in between us. But if there's 5,000 other people at this festival, how can you be sure? How can you see through those people?
I can tell it was him. I know Reagan Bushell.
You
Versus
were-
the other 5,000 people I told
You were always jealous of Reagan's relationship with Becca. Isn't that true?
Yeah, sure, I was jealous.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes, I was jealous.
Thank you. No further questions.
Were you there?
Yes, you saw Reagan Bushell by North Road. Did you see Reagan Bushell by North Road?
Yes, I did.
And how are you sure that this was Reagan Bushell?
Well, they had the exact same build. They were both wearing the same shirt. I had seen Reagan earlier that night. I knew exactly what he was wearing. There were lights shining on him, and it was only a mere 30 feet away.
Now, could you please tell the jury where these events took place at the Lower Music Festival and what city they took place?
Yes, wait, will you repeat the first question? I'm sorry.
In what city did these events take place?
Emerald City.
Let the record reflect the witness has properly established venue.
Objection, Your Honor. This is a rules violation as under page, it is on page, I believe, 68. That redirect is only limited to what happened in cross-examination, and nothing about venue or cities were talked about in cross-examination under section 90.614, subsection 3.
Sustained.
Could you just repeat one more time who you saw walking by North Road?
It was Reagan Bushell. I know it was Reagan.
And where is your campsite?
Our campsite was along the North Road.
No further questions.
Next witness.
Prosecution calls on Mary Schwartz. Please state your name for the court.
My name is Mary Schwartz.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a medical examiner in Emerald City, and I also work at the attorney's office.
What do you do as chief medical examiner?
I oversee everyone in the emergency room. I also see wounds that are afflicted on them, and I also treat them.
What is your educational background?
I received my undergraduate degree and my medical degree from Wheeler University.
What did you receive your undergraduate degree in?
I received my undergraduate degree in forensic sciences
And how long have you been working as chief medical examiner?
for 32 years.
Have you been published or anything?
Yes, I was published in many journals regarding wound drivers.
At this time, the prosecution would like to tender this witness as an expert in forensic science.
Your Honor, we object to the witness being admitted as a forensic science expert. There are multiple fields of forensic science, and admitting her as a forensic science expert allows her a lot of leeway in her testimony, which cannot be provided.
Your Honor, if I may, this witness has been educated on the full realm of forensic science and has had many years of experience in this area, and she does know the entire realm of it.
Your Honor, she's still not. Forensic science is a very broad field. It's only stipulated that she knows about the fibers and the knife in question.
Overruled.
Did you personally conduct all tests on Becky Eagles?
Yes, I did.
And did anyone else?
No, I was the only one.
Did you also review the records of this case?
Yes, I reviewed all records.
Do you know where the festival was that Becca was stabbed?
Yes, it's in Emerald City,
And do you know what county this was in?
Emerald County.
And what state it was in?
It's in Florida.
Let the record reflect that Marion Schwartz has correctly identified and established venue. What did you conclude about the wound on Becca Eagles?
The wound was 3.4 inches deep and 3.4 inches long, 4 inches deep.
What else did you see on the wounds?
I also found gray fibers within the wound and blue fibers around the wound.
Did you find any defense wounds on the body?
I found bruising around the wound. I did not see any bruising on the body itself.
What did this help you conclude?
That the fibers were easily transferred. If the attacker was wearing a long sleeve shirt, the fibers could have been easily rubbed when the attacker struck the victim.
Did you obtain any materials from Detective Shepard?
Yes, I received a blue Pima cotton shirt. I also received a Boiler 559.
Did you use these for any tests?
Yes, I tested both. I tested the knife, the Boiler 550 serrated knife, on a silicone substance, and then I tested the blue Pima cotton fibers with the fibers given to me, or that I found on Becca Abel's body.
Was your test on flesh-like silicone sufficient to exactly simulate the conditions at the time of the stabbing?
Yes, the serration patterns were the same.
And did these fibers match the fibers that were on the wound?
Yes, they were identical match.
And in this case, did you read Reagan Bushell's affidavit?
Yes, I did.
Did you read what he did with his knife after he finished using it?
He sprayed quick dry spray on it, which is like a film, to keep the knife in a good condition.
Would this have come off in the wound?
If it was dry, it would not come off.
So were you able to rule out any knives that would have had quick dry spray on them?
Well, the quick dry spray would not have come off in the wound, so I would rule out the knives with the quick dry spray on them.
And what time did you conclude the stabbing occurred?
From 10 to 11:30 p.m.
No further questions.
Proceed.
Now, you only tested one knife, is that correct?
Yes, I only did test one knife.
And 4 inches and serrated is a pretty big description, wouldn't you say?
It is, yes.
So it would be, seeing that you only tested one knife, it would be very difficult to rule out possible other 4-inch serrated blades. Isn't that correct?
Well, the Boiler 550 is 4
But
inches.
you just stated that 4 inches and serrated is a very big description. Did you really determine that one knife, one specific type of knife, is the one that committed the attack with such a broad generalization?
Well, the serration patterns were the same, so they were identical matches.
Now, you stated in your affidavit that the direction of the wound indicates a right-handed attacker, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And isn't it also true that every witness in this case is stipulated as right-handed?
That is different.
And you're right-handed yourself, correct?
I am.
Is that implying that you possibly could establish?
Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant.
Your Honor, it's not irrelevant. She simply states that it is relevant in her affidavit that she talks about the handedness of the attacker being able to narrow down as part of the evidence that Reagan Bushell. I'm simply trying to state that this is very broad and in no way has relevance to the case.
Overruled.
Now, Ms. Abels was intoxicated at the night of the attack, correct?
Yes, she was.
And this would have caused her heart to, her heart wouldn't have beat as as well, therefore causing it not to pump blood as well. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. When I received her, she had .08 blood alcohol.
And the lack of her heart pumping could have been an explanation of why there was no blood transfer from the victim to the attacker. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you stated that you tested the Moreland 559, correct?
Yes, I tested it on a silicone substance.
And this knife that you tested was brand new, correct?
Yes, it was.
And isn't it true that the defendant's knife, or Mr. Bushell's knife, was a few years old?
That's correct. But he also kept it in good condition. The quick dry spray keeps it in a very good condition.
But, a couple years old, it's a reasonable inference to assume that the knife would have collected some wear and tear. Isn't that correct?
Very little when someone
But
keeps it so well kept as well as he did.
But it's possible that over years and multiple camping trips, that this knife could have developed wear and tear.
A little bit, not much though.
And with all of this knowledge of possibly, excuse me, let me step back a moment. The wear and tear on the knife could have affected the serration pattern of the wound. Isn't that correct?
Well, as I stated, Mr. Bushell kept it in very good condition. The serration pattern was the same.
You're saying there's no possibility that over years of use, this knife didn't develop wear and tear?
It's very possible. It's not very possible. Not very possible.
Now lastly, once again, you also only tested one type of shirt, isn't that correct?
Yes, the Pima cotton shirt.
And there were 5,000 people at this festival, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it possible that one of the 5,000 people that were there also could have been wearing blue American Pima cotton?
I'm sure, but none that
But you're stating that it's possible.
it's possible.
And let's just assume hypothetically the shirt from Reagan, the fibers from Reagan's shirt were transferred. They didn't have to be transferred during an attack, isn't that correct? They could have been transferred in another way, some other formal encounter.
They could have been transferred then, but I found the fibers around the wound.
But it's possible.
It's possible.
No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, John. Did you know when Becca Abels put on her sweater at the Night Festival?
To my knowledge, she put on when she got to her car, to put her sweater, right after their confrontation.
And objection, Your Honor. Redirect is only limited to what was addressed in the cross. I never brought up the fact that Becca Abels was wearing a sweatshirt or what he just addressed.
Your Honor, if I may, he did bring up the fact that Becca Abels had fibers on her sweater and that it could only have been transferred at the time they were speaking before.
Your Honor, may I respond? I did bring up the fibers, but I brought up the fibers of the blue American Pima cotton, not the fibers that he was testifying to being on the Wheeler University sweatshirt that Becca was wearing.
Your Honor, I am directly asking about these blue American Pima cotton fibers.
Sustained. Ask your question.
Were the fibers, do fibers go through sweatshirts?
No, they do not.
And you read that, did you read that Becca Abels had only had her sweatshirt on after she spoke with Reagan Bushell?
Yes.
So, could these fibers have had to have been put on her sweater after she put it on, which was after she went to her car?
Objection, Your Honor. Any question?
He's on cross, he can leave.
Your Honor, this is his witness. He's on direct.
Pardon me?
Your Honor, he's on redirect.
Redirect, indeed he is. I stand corrected.
Would these fibers have only been transferred afterwards?
The fibers were transferred after the sweater was not on.
To your knowledge, did Becca ever have her sweater on when she was speaking with Reagan at Shark's Brewery?
Not to my knowledge. That was the reason why she went to her car.
Did she put her sweater on at her car?
Not to my knowledge.
Are you sure?
Objection, Your Honor. Once again, he's bringing up facts that I never addressed in my cross. And according to section 90.614 in the case packet, page 68, he's not allowed to bring up anything I didn't directly address in my cross.
Your Honor, if I may, he did bring up that these fibers were on the sweater, and that's what I'm asking about.
Your Honor, he was asking about something about the car and about when the fibers were placed. I did never address that.
Sustained.
In your examination, was the shirt a match to Reagan's that night?
Yes, it's an exact match.
And was the knife a match?
Yes, the serration patterns are the same.
No further questions.
Does the man have a quick recross? Just for the record, you never tested Reagan's knife, isn't that correct?
I don't think that found.
But you still never tested the knife. Therefore, you can't directly link it to the attack.
The serration patterns were the same, but I never received the knife.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes.
And you never testified the shirt. The shirt you tested was not Reagan Bushell's shirt.
No, it was the exact same shirt.
But it wasn't Reagan Bushell's shirt. It was a different shirt provided to you by someone who never had any contact with Mr. Bushell. And isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
First question.
Next witness, please.
The prosecution has.
The defense would like you to call Chief Rush. May I proceed?
Please.
Could you please state your name for the record?
I am A.G. Prout.
And where was your most recent education?
I graduated from Lilly University last spring.
And what's your occupation now?
I work at a small publishing firm editing manuscripts.
And where was your most recent dormitory at your university?
I was at Hayes, which was the last place I wanted to be placed.
Did you meet anybody at Hayes that you liked?
Yeah, I did. I met this one guy, Reagan Bushell. He was pretty cool. He wasn't a normal Hayes student that studied all the time.
And did you ever get to meet any of Reagan's friends?
He had this one friend, Becca Abels, and she was the normal Hayes student, studied a lot, but she used to party with us every now and again.
And did you ever meet any of Becca's friends?
She had this one friend, Devin Lynn. Didn't really like her that much. She used to say mean stuff, make snide remarks.
And what was Reagan's reaction?
He never did anything about it. He's always been even-tempered, so.
Now, what happened on the day of April 27th?
On the day of April 27th, I went to the university coffee shop, and when I walked in, Becca and Devin saw me, and Becca kind of just ran up on me and started screaming.
Before you continue, what was Becca's mood when you saw her?
Oh, she was angry.
And so what did she say when she was angry?
Objection, Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Your Honor, this falls under the excited utterance exception of hearsay, as the witnesses have correct predicate of how Ms. Becca Abels was angry. She walked straight up to A.G. Prout and she started letting in to A.G. Prout, screaming. Anything further?
This Becca Abels is not here to testify to whether or not this is a true statement or not.
So once again, what did Becca say to you when she walked up to screaming?
She just came up and started screaming that she was going to the Student Judicial Affairs Council about some paper and that me and Reagan were going to get kicked out of school, and I was just really confused.
So did you have any idea what was going on at this time?
No, I had no idea.
What happened on the day of April 29th?
On the day of April 29th, me and Reagan went to the Woolly Wizard Music Festival.
What time did you get there?
We got there at about 6.
And what did you when you first got there?
I had a few beers, but Reagan set up camp.
And how did he set up camp?
He put up the tent and stuff like that, and he used his knife to cut off the tags of all the new stuff we had gotten on our way up.
And what did he do with the night after it?
He sprayed it with hypnotic spray.
Moving on, where did you guys go next?
After that, we walked around a little bit at the festival. I drank a few more beers, but we ended up at Sharks Organic Brewery.
And what did you do at Sharks?
We saw Becca and Devin.
And what was Reagan's reaction when he saw Becca? What was his mood?
He seemed all worried, anxious. He walked up to her.
And what did he do when he walked up to her?
He tried
tried to talk to her, say that she couldn't do that to him, and she kind of ignored him.
And what did happen next?
She yelled something about he did this to himself and downed her drink and walked away.
And what was Reagan's reaction?
He walked after her and he tapped her on the shoulder and tried to just get her to stop and talk to him, and she seemed to calm down and listen to what he had to say.
What happened next? Or actually, before you go there, where was Devin at the time?
I have no idea. Devin mysteriously disappeared.
What happened next?
They parted ways.
And
Becca and Reagan parted ways.
what did you do?
I walked around the festival, maybe had a few more beers.
Did you get acquainted with how the festival was set up?
Yeah, I did.
Would you recognize the map of the festival if you saw it?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, at this point, may I approach the opposing counsel and the jury and the witness box with what's been marked as Exhibit A of the defense's case?
Is there objection?
Well, we're not admitting into evidence yet, Your Honor. I would like to set up a little bit more correct. Do you recognize this?
Yeah, it's basically the Woolly Wizard Music Festival. It's not really on a scale or anything, but that's it.
And is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Your Honor, at this point, we would like to move the defense exhibit A into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
May I publish the jury, Your Honor?
Proceed.
Now, after you walked around, did you stop anywhere to listen to anything from the festival?
Yeah, I was waiting for Melting Point to come on the main stage, and at about 10 o'clock, I saw Reagan in between the main stage and third stage.
Were you with anybody?
Yeah, I was with Sasha Fang. She's one of my friends.
And you guys saw Ray Bush where?
In between the main stage and the main stage and third stage.
And according to that map, is that anywhere near where Becca's body has been found?
Completely opposite sides of the festival.
Now, what did you do after this?
After that, I decided to go back to our campsite.
Did you walk around first before that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I continued to walk around, and then I finally decided.
What did you notice differently about the campsite when you got there?
It had been taken down and Reagan had changed clothes. And some of our stuff was missing. The mini stove, some food, and Reagan's knife, which he was livid about.
And why would somebody change clothes after setting up a campsite?
Oh, I
Or
mean,
taking
it's,
down a campsite, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's dirty work either way. You get gross and sweaty.
No further questions.
Proceed.
After you set up the campsite, you don't know where Reagan put his knife, did you?
Yeah, but I didn't actually set up the campsite.
But you didn't know where Reagan put his knife, did you?
No, I didn't.
So, you don't know if he kept it on his person or put it anywhere else?
I just said I don't know where he put the knife. I just saw him spray it with quick dress spray.
And how long, you didn't see Reagan Bushel for over an hour and 15 minutes, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
From about 10 to 11:15, correct?
A little bit longer, but yeah.
No further questions?
No redirect is not necessary, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may be excused.
Yeah.
Your Honor, may I retrieve from the exhibit?
Sorry.
May I retrieve the exhibit from the witness stand?
Next witness.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Dr. Jen Sharp to the stand. age for the court?
Yes, I'm Dr. Jen Sharp, and I'm 50 years old.
And what are your qualifications?
I am the Chief of Emergency Care at Emerald City Hospital. I obtained an undergraduate degree in biology from Western University and obtained my medical degree from Highland Medical College. I completed my residency in the intensive care unit at Emerald City Hospital, and I've been practicing medicine for 24 years.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to talk to the witness as a medical expert.
Is there objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
She's accepted as an expert.
Now, have you ever testified in any cases before?
Yes, I have. I've testified in around 50 cases.
And are you usually compensated for your appearance in these cases?
Yes, it's typical that I'm compensated for the time I miss from my work.
Now, what did you do to prepare for this trial?
I reviewed all the case materials, including stipulated facts, witness statements, and official police and medical reports.
After reviewing Dr. Schwartz's testimony or affidavit, what can you conclude about the knife?
Well, what can be concluded is that it was 4 inches long and had a serrated edge. It had a hilt mark, but there was nothing distinctive about this hilt mark.
Were there other knives that would have fit this description?
Your Honor, in proper opinion.
Your Honor, as an expert, I'm simply asking her to describe the generalities of the knife.
Your Honor, if I may, they tendered her as an expert in medicine, not as an expert in knife.
Your Honor, their expert witness was not offered as a knife expert, and yet she also admitted to the generalities of the knife. I'm simply asking my witness to restate that.
Anything further?
Your Honor, our witness was tendered as an expert in forensics, which would involve an analysis of knife wounds and other such things involving that, while this witness is only tendered in medical field.
Your Honor, forensics is once again very broad and does not specifically state to knife expert.
Overruled.
Could you ask this question, please?
Yeah. What can you conclude about, let's just go back a couple steps. What can you conclude about the knife?
It was 4 inches long, had a serrated edge, and didn't have a distinctive hilt mark.
Is this a broad generalization?
Yes, it is. Any number of knives could have fit this description.
Now, with this knife, what knives were tested?
Only one, the Borland 550 serrated folding knife.
And when this knife was tested, was the age of the blade ever taken into account?
No, it was not.
Would the age of the blade have affected the stab wound?
It could have. For example, Mr. Bushell's knife was several years old and had been used a lot, so such wear and tear on the blade could have changed the serration pattern, meaning the new model of the Borland 550 was an inadequate substitute for his model.
Now, were there any chemical traces found in the wound?
No, there were not.
Should there have been?
Had it been Mr. Bushell's knife that was used, then yes, there should have been, because he had cleaned his knife earlier that evening with quick dry spray, which prevents rust by leaving a film around the wound. So had that knife been used in the attack, the film should have come off in the chest cavity of the victim or on the victim's
Objection,
shirt.
Your Honor, in proper opinion.
Your Honor, Your Honor, she, as a medical expert, she is simply stating that, she's simply stating that there was no chemical found in the wound, and she's simply trying to give reasons for why this is possible.
Your Honor, she's stating that there should be a chemical found in the wound and making an assertion that's outside of her expertise.
Overruled.
Should there have been any chemicals found in the wound had it been Reagan Bushell's knife?
Yes.
Now, was there anything else found in or near the wound?
Yes, bright blue American hemocotton fibers were found near the wound.
Were these fibers tested?
Yes, they were.
And were they ever directly linked to Reagan Bushell?
Well, Reagan Bushell's shirt that evening was supposedly bright blue American hemocotton. However, this shirt itself was never tested. And any number of the 5,000 people at that festival could have been wearing blue American hemocotton.
Now, let's just speak hypothetically. Let's say that the fibers did directly come from Reagan Bushell's shirt. Did they have to be transferred during an attack?
No, and they could have been transferred on any number of occasions. For example, earlier that evening he had put his
Objection, Your
hand...
Honor, in proper opinion.
Your Honor, the fibers found near the wound are she's just simply trying to say how general this evidence is. She's not trying to say that they did or didn't come from Reagan Bushell's shirt. She's simply trying to describe the lack of foundation that this evidence has in the case.
Your Honor, if I may, she is directly asserting that the fibers didn't need to come from They could have come where they could have come from and when they could have transferred, and she's not an expert in any sort of fiber transfer or fiber analysis.
Your Honor, she does have awareness of Dr. Schwartz's testimony, and she is basing part of her opinion off of this. Also, she's only describing, she's not saying that they didn't come from Reagan Church. She's simply trying to state how they could have gotten there and that they didn't have to be transferred during an attack.
Your Honor, my objection is that she lacks the knowledge and to give that opinion, as she's not an expert in this and has no training in any sort of fiber analysis or fiber transfer.
Overruled.
Once again, did the fibers have to be transferred during an attack?
No, for example, earlier that evening when Reagan had put his hand on Becca's shoulder, they could have been transferred to her shirt then, which of course she put her sweater on top of that, but when she pulled the sweater on, the sweater could have caught the fibers and then they would have been on the sweater.
Now, Dr. Schwartz says that the wound indicated a right-handed attack.
Yes, that's true.
And is it significant?
Well, it's not exactly smoking gun evidence. 75 to 95% of the population is right-handed, as are all witnesses in this case.
Now, was Miss Abels intoxicated the night of the attack?
Yes, she was. At the time she was admitted in the hospital, she had a .08 intoxication level, meaning around the time of the attack she had a .11, meaning she had around 4 drinks the hour before the attack.
And were there any defensive wounds on Miss Abels' body?
No, there were not.
Do her blood alcohol content and her lack of defensive wounds correlate?
Yes, that could explain why she had no defensive wounds, because it could have slowed her reaction time.
And lastly, in your expert opinion, is there enough evidence to support Reagan Bushell's knife being used in this attack?
No, I don't believe there's enough evidence to suggest that.
No further questions,
Proceed.
You mentioned that Becca Abel's blood alcohol content could explain the lack of defensive wounds, but based on your knowledge of Marion Schwartz's affidavit, couldn't those wounds, the lack of defensive wounds, also be explained by her knowing, or him knowing, by Becca knowing her attacker?
Yes, but in my opinion, the blood alcohol would explain that even more.
But it is possible that Becca knew her attacker,
There's any number of possibilities to anything.
and Becca knew Reagan Bushell, correct?
Yes, she did. She also knew other witnesses in this case as well.
And also, based on your knowledge of this case, you know that Detective Shepard confirmed the make and model of the knife with multiple witnesses, correct?
Yes, but they weren't the exact same. In fact, they were older or different models. No one actually tested Reagan's shirt or Reagan's knife.
But you know that the Borland 550 is the exact type of shirt and the exact type of knife that Reagan owned the night of that festival, correct?
Yes, but Reagan's Borland 550 was several years old, which could make it different, meaning the new one was
But
an
you also know
inadequate
that Reagan
substitute.
you also know that Reagan took good care of his knife, correct?
No one knows that for sure. I know he sprayed it with quick dry spray. However, no one in this case knows specifically how he took care of his knife every day.
But he cared about that knife,
Yes, to my knowledge he did. That doesn't mean that
And
it
he
didn't
sprayed it.
change the serration pattern.
and he sprayed it with quick dry spray every time he was done using it.
Yes, but quick dry spray prevents rust. It doesn't prevent the serration pattern from being changed or worn.
And the shirt that was tested by Dr. Marion Schwartz, that was the exact same type of shirt that Reagan wore the night of the festival, correct?
Yes, however, 5,000 people were at that festival, so out of those 5,000 people, many of the people could have been wearing the same type
So
of
it
shirt.
was the exact same shirt that Reagan was wearing the night of the festival?
Yes, but it doesn't mean they were
And
from
you know
him.
that the fibers from that shirt match the fibers from the wounds on Becca's body, correct?
Well, the fibers from the new shirt did, yes. No one tested Reagan's shirt.
But the fibers, considering that shirt is made by a company as mass-produced, the fibers would have remained the same between the two shirts, wouldn't they?
Well, I would assume so, but I wouldn't know that because no one actually tested Reagan's shirt.
But they would use different fibers in the same shirt.
I would assume not, no.
And also, you know that the fibers that were found on Becca's body were not only found on her shirt, but also on the outside of her sweater, correct?
Yes, they
and
were.
you know that she wasn't wearing her sweater at the time she had contact with Becca or with Reagan, correct?
Yes, however, as I previously stated, when you pull a sweater over your head, it doesn't come on perfectly straight. So the fibers could have been transferred to the shirt as she was pulling it on.
But the fibers were on the outside of the sweater, correct?
Yes.
She didn't put the sweatshirt on inside out, did she?
No, but if you've noticed
So
when you
the
pull on a
fibers could-
sweater, it gets rumpled up as you're pulling it on. They could have easily been transferred to the inside of it.
Or
Sweaters
they
don't
could
come
have
on
easily been
directly.
transferred if Reagan Bushell stabbed Becca Abels, couldn't they?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
But that's not necessarily how they had to have been transferred, is it?
No, it's any one possibility. They're not necessarily from Reagan at all.
So they very possibly could have been transferred at a different time where Reagan made contact with Becca, correct?
Of course they could have, yes.
No further questions.
Proceed.
Was Reagan's knife ever tested?
No, Reagan's knife is not.
Was Reagan's shirt ever tested?
No.
Is there sufficient enough evidence, in your expert opinion, to link Reagan Bushel to this attack?
No.
No further question, Your Honor.
Calling the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Reagan Bushel to the stand. Would you please introduce yourself before?
My name is Reagan Bushel, and I'm 22 years old.
Did you know Becca Abel?
Yes, Becca and I have been friends since we were little kids. Went to the same school, competed in the same things, we even went to the same college together.
Did you both compete in something called the Lion Prize?
Yes, Becca and I both competed for the Lion Prize.
What is the Lion Prize?
It's an award for academic excellence, and I think you get some money if you win it.
Why did you enter into this competition?
Well, my parents were always hounding me to do the best I can do and get straight A's, and this looked like something to get them off my back.
Was it your original intention to enter into this competition?
No, but once Becca mentioned it, I kind of did want to enter.
Did you and Miss Abels ever take any of the same classes?
Yes, I took a campaign strategies class before Becca did.
Did you ever try to help her in her class?
I did. Becca was complaining about how, well, I learned that Becca's class, it was hard, and I tried to help her out by sending her a paper I plagiarized from someone.
Do you regret having done that now?
Yes, it's not something I'm proud of.
Did Miss Abels get upset with you for this?
Yeah, she seemed really mad. She wouldn't answer any of my calls or my text messages or my emails.
Did you eventually get the opportunity to speak with her?
Yes, we both went to the we both went to the Woolly Wizard Music Festival together. Well, not together. She went and I went with someone else.
When you got to that festival, what did you do?
Well, we got there and AG and I started to set up camp. Well, actually it was more I set up camp and AG started to drink a little bit.
How does one set up camp?
Well, start putting out the camping supplies, get everything set up, and I also just cut off the tags from some of the new equipment we had bought with my Borland 559. And then I sprayed it with quick dry spray and put it back in my SUV.
Did you ever go to Sharp's Organic Brewery?
Yes. I went to Sharp's Organic Brewery with AG and we saw Becca there.
Did you get the opportunity to talk to her?
Yeah, when I first went up to Becca, she ignored me and went away, but I cut up with her and I learned that she was angry at me for entering the Lion Prize. And once I learned this, I immediately offered to withdraw my application, and everything seemed to calm down a whole lot between us.
How did she seem to you at that time?
I felt a lot relieved, and she seemed to be cool and calm, and I thought our friendship had been restored.
Were you at that time still under the impression that she was going to turn you in for cheating?
No, I felt relieved.
Did you leave after that?
Yes, after that, I went for a walk by myself for half an hour.
Did you go back to your campsite?
Yes, I went back to my campsite and I found out that my SUV had been broken.
Was anything missing?
Yeah, a mini stove, some cans of food, and my knife that my ex was gave to me.
Where did you get that? Did you care about this knife?
Yeah, I did my best to take care of it, but it did pick up some dents along the way.
Did you ever report this knife stolen?
No, I didn't. It was an expensive knife, but it was completely my fault for leaving my SUV unlocked, and it's not anything the police can do that pretty much help me.
Did you think you would ever recover it?
No, I didn't.
Did you leave the campsite?
Yes, I packed up the campsite and texted AG it was time to go. And while I was packing up the campsite, I got kind of dirty, so I changed my clothes. And then I dropped AG off at our apartment and I headed to my parents' house.
And what did you do the next day?
Next day I learned out that Rebecca had been stabbed, and it was just a horrible time. I mean, I spent hours in my room crying, and my best friend had just been taken out of my life.
Did you do anything to get your mind off of it?
Yeah, I had some chores I would do. I'd switch out my closet every once in a while, so I did that. I threw away some clothes, and I got my SUV detailed.
Do you do this regularly?
Yes, when I go camping, that's usually something I do.
Did you have the opportunity, did you talk to Detective Kennedy Shepard?
Yes, the detective came to my house exactly.
Did you cooperate fully with Detective Kennedy Shepard?
Yes, I did everything he asked. I let him search, and he came back later the next day.
Did he find any evidence while he searched your house?
Of course not. I didn't even know why he was looking through everything.
Tell me further.
You cheated in your campaign strategies course, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It's not something I'm proud of, but I did know that.
You cheated because you were afraid you were going to fail the course and you didn't get a little extra help, right?
It was a hard
Objection,
course.
ambiguous question.
Your Honor, the witness has started to answer the question. If he's confused by what I'm asking, I will re-ask it, but I'm just trying to ask whether or not the cheating was because the course was hard.
It was a compound question, Your Honor. There are two questions in one.
Would you rephrase, please?
Yes, Your Honor. You cheated in this campaign strategies course because you were afraid you were going to fail, correct?
It was a hard course, and I was kind of in a pinch.
And you were in a pinch because if you failed the course, you would lose $20 million, wouldn't you?
Well, actually, I didn't know I was going to fail the course. It was just a hard course. I could have submitted a paper and not done that well.
But if you didn't do well, you were at the risk of failing the course, correct?
C isn't a failing grade.
But should your GPA drop below 3.5, you would lose $20 million, wouldn't you?
Oh, that is true. That was a trust fund set up by my grandfather.
And so you took action by taking A.G. Prout's paper,
Yes.
even though it was a blatant breaking of the rules of Wheeler University.
Yes, as again, it's not something I'm proud of, but I did do it.
Now, you would also lose this $20 million if Becca Abels went to the Student Judicial Affairs Council, wouldn't you?
Yes, I learned that I could get kicked out of school for it, but once I talked to Becca, everything seemed to calm down a whole lot.
So, you cheated on the paper to save the $20 million, correct?
Objection, asked and answered.
I can rephrase the question, I'm just trying to make it
Thank
clear.
you. Sustain.
You took the paper, correct?
That is correct.
Because you wanted the $20 million.
No, you have to understand that I could have got a C on the paper. It doesn't really matter, except I was kind of in a pinch because I wasn't really ready for the class. It was very hard.
Now, you would also lose the $20 million, just for clarification, if Becca went to the Student Judicial Affairs Council on Monday, May 2nd, correct?
If they had found me guilty of cheating, yes.
So you took action?
Yeah, but we talked to Becca and we seemed to go and calm everything down.
So you wanted to talk to Becca, didn't you?
Yeah, and I did, and afterwards, everything seemed very positive between us.
Even though Becca had stated that you had done this to yourself, and she seemed angry, didn't she?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Becca stated that you had done this to yourself, and she was angry, wasn't she?
Yeah, but after I offered to withdraw from Lion Prize, it seemed like something that Becca really wanted to get. She seemed to calm down.
She said she'd think about it, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
So you walked the opposite direction?
Yeah, I went to the southeast side of the festival.
And during this time, about an hour and 15 minutes, you were alone, weren't you?
Well, I walked by myself from about 9:50 to 10:20, and then I decided to go back to the campsite. I got back around 10:45.
And no one can testify as to where you were.
Actually, I was just walking around the festival. Many people may have seen me. I just didn't notice them.
Now, you wanted to talk to Becca because you wanted to fix your friendship, right?
Yes, definitely. And afterwards, I was pretty sure our friendship had been restored.
Even though Becca still wasn't talking to you?
No, she did talk to me. That's what our conversation was about. And our friendship was fixed.
She only talked to you after you physically put your hand on her, correct?
Well, I touched her shoulder, she turned around, and we had our conversation.
This was more than a conversation. You were yelling, weren't you?
It was loud music, but that's the only reason why.
You went back to your campsite after walking around on your own, correct?
Yes.
Where you found your Portland 550 95 been taken.
Yeah, I left my SUV unlocked. Someone must have taken it.
This knife was important to you, wasn't it?
Yeah, someone gave it to my uncle in 2007.
So it was of sentimental value?
I wouldn't say that. It's just something I valued.
You took good care of the knife?
I tried to, but sometimes it kind of got dinged up.
Now, you never filed a police report that your car had been broken into, correct?
No, I didn't. The knife was really expensive, but I had left the SUV unlocked. It was my fault. I mean, there are bad people in this world, but I shouldn't give them the opportunity to steal my knife.
And after you realized that the knife had been taken, you told AG it was time to leave?
Yeah, it had been a pretty emotional day, you understand. And I packed up the campsite and told AG it was time to go.
You'd been an emotional day because you had been fighting with your best friend, correct?
Yeah, but I felt relieved because our friendship had been
Now,
restored.
when you went to leave the festival, you took AG to your apartment on the Wheeler campus, correct?
I took AG to our apartment.
And then you continued to drive an extra amount of time to your parents' house, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the weekend. I just wanted to relax.
You had been at your parents' house the previous Tuesday, hadn't you?
I had been telling them about the prize, yes.
Had you been at their house?
I had been telling them about the prize.
Because you were excited you were named the finalist.
Yeah.
You thought they'd be proud of you.
Yes, my parents are so pushy, I guess is the right word.
So you were very motivated to make them happy, weren't you?
Yeah, but yes, I was.
So to make them happy, you applied for the Lion Prize?
Yes.
Even though you told Becca you wouldn't apply for the prize?
I said it wasn't something I was interested in, but my mind changed.
You never told Becca your mind changed, did you?
No, but we've been best friends for years. I'm pretty sure she could know what I was thinking.
And when you were at your family's house, you woke up the next morning and did some chores, didn't you?
No, that's not really what happened.
Is it not your statement today that you did some chores the next day?
After I heard on the news that my best friend had been stabbed, I cried for hours. It was just really upsetting, and I had chores to do, yes, and I did them, but I pretty much did them to take my mind off of things.
These chores involved throwing away the clothes you wore the previous night, correct?
I usually go and get a new closet whenever half years.
And why did you throw away these clothes you wore the previous night?
Oh, I didn't want memories of the painful place where my best friend had been stabbed.
Is it possible that these clothes had some substances on them?
Well, they were dirty from when I picked up the campsite, yes.
Why didn't you throw them away at the festival?
Because I usually carry a bag around that I switch clothes in, and then afterwards, I usually take it back to my house, and then from there, I usually wash them, but since I didn't know Becca had been stabbed then, and I learned later, I just wanted to get rid of them.
Now, you had lived in this house for 18 years previously before you went to university, correct?
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, if you allow me just to stop quickly, I will get to my point for the next question.
Sustained, go ahead.
You lived in this house for 18 years, didn't you?
Yes, I was living at my parents' house.
So it's safe to assume that you knew the garbage collection schedule.
No, I mean, I didn't really set the garbage out by myself. My dad was the one who usually took it out. I was the one
But
who
this
usually
garbage
did
was
the
collected on
dishes.
Saturday morning, wasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has already testified that he does not know the garbage schedule.
Your Honor.
Sustained.
Now, that day, Saturday, April 30th, Detective Shepard came to your house, didn't he?
Yeah, and I cooperated with everything that he asked me to do.
And this involved looking in your car and looking for clothes you wore the previous night?
Yeah, I told him everything that I had done, and he left.
He came back the next day, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He arrested you, didn't he?
And he did.
For the assault and battery of Becca Abels, correct?
I was shocked at something like that. I didn't know he get me for something like that.
And when he arrested you, you were in possession of a loaded .22 handgun, weren't you?
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, according to the stipulations, it is up to you as to whether or not Reagan Bushell's possession of the .22 handgun is admissible today. We
Your
believe
Honor.
that it is admissible, as it goes to show the defendant's propensity to carrying deadly weapons and to violence.
Your Honor, first off, the witness's propensity to do anything has not been put at issue. Secondly, this testimony has nothing to do with the case whatsoever. The case is about aggravated assault and aggravated battery. And if I'm not mistaken, the prosecution thinks that he committed the aggravated assault with a knife, not with a gun.
We are stating that he did commit the assault and battery with a knife. His possession of the gun goes to prove his nature, and seeing as his character is part of is an element of his ability to carry out the assault and battery, we believe that this is admissible.
Your Honor, it's not admissible. His character, once again, has not been put at issue. What has been put at issue is whether or not he did it, not whether or not he is a good person. And even if it had been, whether or not he carries a firearm has no bearing on whether or not he's a good person. This is completely irrelevant.
Once more.
Ultimately, Your Honor, it is up to you to decide whether or not it is admissible according to the stipulations. The state does believe that it is admissible, as it will go to prove the nature of the defendant.
I'm going to say it is inadmissible.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to strike and ask the jury to disregard.
Please strike with disregard.
Now, you found out that Becca Abels had been stabbed on Saturday morning, didn't you?
Yeah, I heard it on the news.
But you didn't go visit her in the hospital, did you?
No, there's 50 hospitals where I live, and I don't know which one she was in. And plus, I was just so sad that she. Sorry.
You didn't go visit your best friend in the hospital as she lay in coma?
I did not.
Objection, Your Honor. Witness, the attorney had already asked that question, and it has been answered.
Anything?
Would you like to move on, Your Honor?
Sustained. Move on.
You were wearing a blue Ochio Rosso shirt that night, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And where did you say you were for the hour and 15 minutes when nobody knows exactly your location?
Well, I'm sure if you went and asked everybody at the festival, you would find someone who saw me. But I was just walking around the southeast part of the festival.
You walked towards your campsite after that, correct?
Well, I stayed on the southeast side from about 9:50, 10:20, and then I got back to my campsite around 10:45.
Your campsite was closer to the north road than to the south road, correct?
I'm not really sure.
Now, you said you walked around this festival, surely you would understand the layout, wouldn't you?
I told you, I had a pretty emotional week. I wasn't so concentrated on what was happening around me as just trying to get myself in order.
Do you not remember anything that happened at the festival?
No, I do. We just had a whole testimony.
Is it possible that you don't exactly remember what happened in your conversation with Becca Abels?
No, I'm sure I remember that part. It was my best friend.
No other question.
Proceed.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness with what has previously been marked as Exhibit A. Would
Approach.
you like one, Your Honor?
No.
Opposing counsel, do you have?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know what this is a map of?
Yeah, this looks like the Woolly Worship Music Festival. In fact, it says so on the wall.
Can you please point out for us where you were walking around after you got done charging your
Southeast part of the festival.
And where was Becca's body found?
It says Becca's body was found.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is unable to testify as to the map because he just testified that he was not an emotional clarity at this point.
Your Honor, this evidence has already been admitted and has been authenticated. The witness is allowed to testify as well.
Sustained. Overruled, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Where was Becca's body found?
It was found up here.
Is that anywhere near where you were?
No, it was on the southeast part.
May I retrieve your document, Your Honor? Now, Mr. Bushel, could you have ever heard Becca Abels?
No, she was my best friend. There's not enough money in the world to be my best friend.
Nothing further.
Anything further?
Mayor, at this time, we're prepared to closing this argument.
Your Honor, the defense rests.
I think we're adjourned. Thank you. You may be excused. Please be seated. you all, let's see, what else we got? Is there anything else I'm supposed to be saying to you now?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to present a closing argument at this time?
Please proceed.
The state would like to reserve 1 minute of rebuttal time.
Proceed.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Kinsey Grant, and today, along with my co-counsel Joshua Cottle and Noah Scherstrom, we have represented the state of Florida, in this case of the state of Florida versus Reagan Bushel. This is a case about a young man driven by greed and $20 million to stab his best friend in the chest with his Borland 550 serrated edge folding knife. You see, on April 29, 2011, Reagan Bushel was driven to the point of violence. Stated that he was under a lot of pressure, that he had an emotionally taxing week. This emotional taxation had caused him to take great measures. He stabbed his best friend in the chest, leaving her for dead, to lay in a pool of her blood until she was found by Devin Lynn, where she was transported to the Emerald City Hospital and remains today in a coma. Now, today we are charging Reagan Bushel with assault and aggravated battery. Assault is the intentional and unlawful threat by word or act to commit violence against another person, coupled with an apparent ability to do so. In committing this violence, the victim has a well-founded fear that this violence is imminent. Aggravated battery is the intentional and unlawful touching or striking of another person against their will, with the use of a deadly weapon, causing great bodily harm, permanent disability, and permanent disfigurement. Now, to find Reagan Bushel guilty today, we must realize beyond reasonable doubt he has committed these crimes. As a state, we carry the burden of proof, and we must have proof to you beyond reasonable doubt that these things did occur. We did, members of the jury. You heard from the witnesses, you saw the evidence, and you heard the testimony. You heard how Reagan Bushel was at the Woolly Wizard Music Festival for the sole purpose of tracking down Becca Abels to persuade her not to turn him in. Because if she did turn him in that following Monday, May 2nd, he would stand to lose $20 million. You also heard how Reagan Bushel physically put a hand on Becca Abels, whirling her around outside of Shark's Organic Brewery. This alone is enough to find Reagan Bushel guilty of the assault charge. You also heard how Reagan Bushel was unaccounted for nearly an hour and a half at the festival. Nobody knew where Reagan was. Reagan even said himself he was just walking around. He said he wasn't quite sure about where he went exactly, but maybe people saw him. No witnesses in today's case saw him. That is because he was by Becca Abels' car as he was plunging a knife into her chest. You also heard how this knife was a Borland 550 serrated-edged folding knife. You heard this from several witnesses on both the defense and the prosecution. Now, this knife was the only knife tested against the wound on Reagan Bushel, on Becca Abels. The defense tried to tell you that this is not enough evidence, as they only tested one knife and one shirt. But they only tested one knife and one shirt because that was enough to find Reagan Bushel to be the owner of the knife and the person wearing the shirt. It is common knowledge that for a crime to occur, there must exist means, motive, and opportunity. Reagan's means, his Borland 550 knife. His opportunity, the Woolly Wizard Music Festival, when Becca Abels was left alone, defenseless and inebriated. His motive, $20 million. He wanted the $20 million, and he knew the only way he could get it was if Becca Abels was silenced. And silenced she was. Thank you.
Your Honor, how the defense been able to object in her closing? We would have objected to facts, not to evidence. As she did mention about which hospital Becca Abels was sent to, that was never brought out in evidence. And also she brought out that nobody saw Reagan during the time of the attack, and clearly A.G. Proud had seen him around the southeast corner of the festival. May I proceed? Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is the burden of proof that is put on the prosecution. Now, the prosecution has stated things like Reagan Bush was motivated by greed, but yet you heard that nothing could get in between the way of friendship between Becca and Reagan Bushel. Now, the prosecution is supposed to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Reagan Bushel is guilty. Yet your case is a reasonable doubt. They talk about a $20 million. Well, in fact, the prosecution's case has 20 million holes in its case. Now let's talk about the other possibilities in this case. First, it could have been A.G. Prout as much as it could have been Reagan. A.G. Prout had the same opportunity as she went to the Woolly Wizard Music Festival. A.G. Prout had a motive also. If Becca would have turned in her report, A.G. Prout too would have been kicked out of school, as A.G. Prout was a part of this cheating. A.G. Prout also had the same access to the knife Reagan did, as it was placed in the car. And A.G. Prout also was drinking that night, which could have led her to make a crazy decision that she could regret later, like stabbing Becca Abels. Now, it was also testified by even the prosecution's witnesses that there were 5,000 people at the festival, 27 of whom were arrested. That does not mean there were only 27 people that did a crime that night. That means only 27 people were caught doing a crime. So therefore, there could have been countless amounts of other crimes where they were just unsolved, like this one stands now. Now, the state's case is so weak that it could be applied to A.G. Prout and 5,000 other people. But they chose Reagan Bushel because one witness who has bias told a detective about Reagan Bushel. Now let's talk about the knife that the prosecution has brought up. The only thing that we know for sure about the knife is that it was 4 inches and serrated. Now, jury, you are instructed to not leave your common sense at the door when you walk into this courtroom. We must use that common sense to think of how many other knives there are out there. And to choose one knife because one suspect had it is not using your common sense at all. The quick dry spray, there was no quick dry spray on the wound, and Reagan Bushel's knife had quick dry spray on it. And also, the knife that Reagan Bushel owned had serration patterns that could have been different than the inflicted wound, as Reagan did use his knife numerous amounts of times. There was a cotton fiber found around the wound, which has been agreed upon by both experts to be American Pima cotton. But yet, there are once again countless other possibilities in this case. If the cotton did come off of Reagan Bushel, it could have come off on an encounter that he had with Becca earlier. As the prosecution did state that he put his hand on Becca. It could have come off if Reagan had an encounter with AG, and the fiber could have come off, gotten onto AG, and therefore, when AG stabbed Becca, gotten off him. Or it could have come off one of the other 5,000 people that came to the festival. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the opportunity that the prosecution has brought up. The prosecution states that since Reagan Bushel went to the Woolly Wizard Music Festival, that he had the opportunity to do this. Well, using the prosecution's logic, we give A.G. Prout the same opportunity that Reagan Bushel has in this case. And let's talk about the motive. The prosecution states that Reagan Bushel had the motive as Becca could have turned in a report getting Reagan in trouble. Well, so would have A.G. Prout. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution's job is to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Reagan Bushel is guilty. But yet their case runs rancid with reasonable doubt. Now they have the burden of proof, but yes, they have proven nothing that suggests Reagan Bushel has done anything. They have no direct evidence. The knife did not lead back to Reagan Bushel. It's just circumstantial. The cotton fibers did not lead directly to Reagan Bushel. Once again, circumstantial. The opportunity could have applied to 5,000 other people at the festival. And the motive could have applied to A.G. Prout just as much as it could have applied to Reagan Bushel. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as we look over all the evidence in this case, we ask that you think, about what this case is actually about, and how a circumstantial foundation cannot lead to a case, and that the prosecution has chosen one person out of 5,000 other suspects, and that we ask that you recognize that Reagan Bushel is not guilty of all charges. Thank you.
jury, the opposing counsel has stood up today and told you that 5,000 people had the opportunity to commit this crime. However, those 5,000 people didn't own a Moreland 559. Those 5,000 people weren't functioning on the motive of $20 million. Those 5,000 people weren't Reagan Bushel, because Reagan Bushel is the person who stabbed Becca Abels. They're trying to pin this crime on A.G. Prout, their own witness. A.G. Prout didn't know where the knife was when Reagan sprayed it with quick dry spray. A.G. Prout didn't even know that the paper had been plagiarized until Reagan told him. Members of the jury, the defense has come up here and tried to poke holes in our case. They have failed, because our case is rock solid. We have proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Reagan Bushel committed these crimes. The knife matches, the wounds match, the fibers match. Now it is your job as the finders of fact to come to the correct verdict. A verdict of guilty for both charges for Reagan Bushel. Thank you.
I've been able to object to their statement. I would have objected to, once again, facts not in evidence, as they stated 5,000 people at the festival did not own the Moreland 559. There was not 5,000 people that came in this courtroom and testified, nor was there anybody who testified about the knife ownership of anybody else at the festival besides Reagan Bushel. Therefore, that is not in case evidence.
Your Honor, if I may, we are presenting a closing argument and these are not recognized objections. I would just like the jury to be aware of that as they go into deliberation.
Well, Your Honor, it is in the rules that you are supposed to limit your closing to what's in the case. Therefore, I'm using a rules violation. Objection to rules violation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing further? I believe our case is closed now. Would one of the teams leave and the